The wind cut like glass across the tracks, shrieking low and cold as it swept over the barren Wyoming plain. Snow wasn't falling anymore. It hung in the air, frozen there by the weight of the winter. Along the half-buried rails, a figure trudged forward, heavy coat threadbare, scarf pulled up to his eyes, each step more labored than the last. He was old, but not frail. His frame spoke of someone who once carried heavy things, who'd once built, fought, and survived. But now, he moved like a man not afraid of dying, only indifferent to the timing. Silas Granger. 63 years behind him, a lifetime of regret weighing down the rest. Out here, in the wind and silence, no one spoke his name, not since they'd buried the girl and her mother. He hauled a sled behind him, a crude thing he'd built from fence posts and wagon scrap. Firewood was stacked on it, lashed tight. He'd spent the morning cutting pine along the tree line, the rest of the day hauling it toward the abandoned station house that passed for town. Every week, the same ritual: chop, haul, sell, disappear. The townsfolk avoided him as much as he avoided them. That suited Silas fine. But as he rounded the next bend where the tracks curved toward the ridge, his pace slowed. At first he thought it was debris. Then he saw a flash of skin, small, bare feet protruding from behind the rocks where snow had been kicked loose. Another step forward and he caught the glimmer of eyes, 2 of them, then 4, children. Silas stopped, just stood there, breathing, feeling the wind gnaw at his skin as his mind struggled to make sense of what he saw. 2 kids, a boy and a girl, huddled close, wrapped in rags, not clothes. Dirt smeared their faces, or was it soot? He couldn't tell. They watched him like animals waiting for a trap to spring. He could have turned. Every instinct screamed too. He'd buried his past in these hills. Someone else's trouble wasn't his burden, not anymore, but his boots stayed planted. The girl moved first. No older than 11, maybe 12 at most. Her face was all sharp angles, cheekbones drawn tight, lips cracked from cold. Her arms circled the smaller child, a boy of perhaps 7, his head pressed into her ribs. He didn't move. He didn't speak. "Keep walking," the girl hissed, voice raw from disuse. Silas said nothing. His mouth worked, but no words came. He shifted the sled strap from one shoulder to the other as if considering. The girl's eyes narrowed. "I said, keep walking." But he stepped forward, her body tensed like a drawn wire. She scrambled upright, pulling the boy with her, backing against the rocks. She was ready to fight. With what? He couldn't guess. Her fists were shaking too hard to be any weapon. "I'm not law," Silas said at last. His voice rasped like rust. It startled even himself. "Don't care. You'll freeze." She said nothing. Silas looked down at the boy. His skin was too pale. Blue crept up his lips. He hadn't blinked. Silas dropped the sled rope. He pulled the scarf from his mouth and knelt slowly, like approaching a cornered animal. "I got a blanket." "No. Take it." "I said no." She bared her teeth. Her feet were bare. She didn't even notice. The boy shifted once, only once. His eyes flickered to Silas, then back to the snow. Silas hesitated. What did he think he could say? That the cold would kill them? They already knew. Still kneeling, he laid the blanket down between them. He didn't throw it. He didn't push it. He simply laid it down on the snow, as gentle as you'd lay down a baby. Then he stood and walked past. 10 steps later he stopped. The weight in his chest wouldn't let him move further. He stared at the rails ahead, the sky gray as iron. He remembered his daughter's fingers, smaller than that. Boys clutching at him, asking why she was cold. He remembered the last words he never answered. Silas turned. She hadn't touched the blanket. "Cabin's 5 miles north," he said. "You'll die here." She glared. "I got food, fire. You don't trust me, fine. But he can't walk much longer." She held her brother tighter. Silas said no more. He didn't beg. He simply waited. At last, the girl's jaw clenched. She shifted her weight. The boy's knees buckled as she tried to lift him. Silas moved forward without thinking. She flinched but didn't strike as he took the boy from her arms. He weighed nothing, just skin and bone wrapped in cold. "Follow," Silas said. And without looking back, he started walking. The storm hit by nightfall. They barely made it to the ridgeline before snow began to fall again. Silas found a rock outcrop where the wind broke just enough for a fire. He gathered deadfall as Clara. He'd heard her name once when the boy murmured it, refused to let her brother leave her lap. He lit the fire. The boy stirred weakly, too far gone for fear. Silas watched Clara from across the flames. She met his gaze, defiant. "What's his name?" She didn't answer. "You have a plan, out here?" "Not your business." Silas let the silence stretch. The wind filled it. "I didn't ask to find you," he said. "Didn't ask to be found." Snow gathered on her shoulders. She didn't brush it off. Hours crawled by. The boy drifted in and out. Once he whispered something, but neither adult could hear. At dawn, Silas shouldered the boy again. "Cabin's close." Clara hesitated. She eyed the axe at Silas's belt. "You kill us, we haunt you." "Fair trade," she followed. The last mile was brutal. Snow above their knees. Silas kept moving, kept breathing. His bones burned. His heart, though, beat harder than it had in years. Finally, the cabin came into view. Small, crooked, half buried under snowdrifts, smoke curling faintly from the crooked chimney. Inside, it was no palace. Just logs, a stone hearth, and scars from too many cold winters. Silas laid the boy near the hearth. He moved without speaking, stripping the wet rags from Eli's skin, wrapping him in a wool blanket. He fed the fire until sweat trickled down his neck. Clara stood in the doorway, too proud to step further. Silas looked at her, long and hard. "Inside, or he won't wake up." She stepped in. For the first time, she looked like a child. Silas made broth from jerky and old root vegetables. He didn't speak, neither did she. Only when he passed her the bowl did she meet his eyes again. Her hands trembled. "Name's Clara," she said finally, soft, like surrender. Silas nodded once. "And him?" "Eli." The boy's eyes fluttered open, just barely. Clara put the bowl down and crawled to him. Silas watched from the shadows. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, something began to thaw. Morning broke not with sunlight, but with a dim, sullen gray that seeped through the frost-laced windows of the cabin. The fire had burned low overnight, its embers faint and trembling, much like the boy's breathing. Silas knelt beside him, adjusting the blanket that covered his frail body. Eli's face was pallid, but there was color now, faint traces of life that hadn't been there when Silas first carried him from the snow. Every so often the boy's lips moved as if forming words, but no sound emerged. Across the room, Clara sat with her back against the far wall, knees drawn tight to her chest. She watched Silas without speaking. Her hunger was evident, but she wouldn't take more than half a bowl of broth the night before. He knew pride when he saw it. She carried it like armor. Silas stood slowly. His joints complained as they always did, but he ignored the ache. He poured water from the melting snow pot, stirred it, and forced himself to sip. Hunger could wait. Work could not. He stepped outside. The world lay buried in height. Snowdrifts curled against the walls of the cabin like beasts settling to sleep. The sky threatened more. He chopped wood until his arms numbed, then split more than he needed, though he wasn't sure why. Maybe he needed the noise. Maybe he needed something that still broke when hit. By the time he carried the load inside, Clara had moved. She sat beside Eli now, her fingers brushing strands of hair from his damp forehead. Her shoulders stiffened when Silas entered, but she said nothing. "He's still breathing," Silas said, not as comfort, but as fact. She glanced at him. The bruised dark shadows beneath her eyes told him she hadn't slept. "Don't want your help," she whispered. "Didn't ask if you did." Clara looked back at her brother. Her hand trembled. "He's all I got." Silas stacked the wood near the hearth. "You're not wrong." Silence stretched between them again, thick as the snow outside. It was Clara who broke it this time. "You got a name?" Silas hesitated. "Silas." She nodded once, as if filing the information away for some future calculation. He wanted to ask her how long they'd been out there, where they'd come from, why no one was looking for them. But questions were like doors. Open one, and you might not like what steps through. Instead, he said, "Fire's low, feed it." She did. The hours dragged. Eli stirred only once, eyes half-lidded, breath shallow. Silas watched from the shadows. By afternoon, hunger overruled Clara's pride. She accepted the bread and stew Silas set down, but ate like a prisoner, unsure if the next meal would come. That night, when the wind rose and rattled the shutters, Silas lay awake. Memories pressed in. His daughter, coughing weakly, asking for her mother. The empty bed. The grave dug too shallow because the ground was frozen too deep. He'd built this cabin for 3. Now there were 3 inside again. When dawn came, he found Clara standing outside the door, barefoot in the snow, watching the tree line. "Get inside," Silas ordered. She shook her head. "I'm listening." "For what?" But she wouldn't say. Silas followed her gaze, seeing nothing but pine in shadow. Still, he stood beside her, letting the silence answer whatever she wouldn't. 2 more days passed. Eli grew stronger. His fever broke. He ate, barely. Clara grew quieter. On the 3rd night, Silas returned from checking the snares to find Clara searching the cabin. He said nothing as he watched her turn over crates, dig beneath old blankets, rifle through shelves. When her hand closed around the folded newspaper hidden beneath the floorboards, he stepped inside. Clara froze. "Why are you hiding that?" she whispered. Silas said nothing. She unfolded the brittle sheet. The headline screamed back at her, "Children missing after family massacre. 2 presumed dead." The tremor in her hand wasn't fear, it was rage. "You knew." "I guessed." She shook her head, furious tears burning in her eyes. "Why'd you keep us here, waiting for law? If I wanted law, they'd be here." "Then why?" "Because you looked like my daughter," Silas said softly. It wasn't the answer she expected. It wasn't the answer he expected either. Clara's breath hitched. Then, without a word, she fed the newspaper to the fire. Silas didn't stop her. The next morning, footsteps crunched outside the cabin. Silas looked up from where he was splitting wood. Clara stepped from the doorway beside him, instinctively moving closer, her body tensed to run. 3 men approached. 2 were rough-cut, carrying rifles across their backs. The 3rd wore black, his coat immaculate despite the snow, his expression colder than the wind itself. Reverend Hartley. Silas knew him. Everyone did. "Morning, Granger," Hartley said smoothly, stopping just short of the woodpile. "Reverend. Thought I'd pay a visit. Town folks are worried about you." Silas said nothing. Hartley's gaze drifted past him to the cabin. "Strange footprints up this way." Silas's fingers tightened on the axe handle. "Wolves," he said. "Funny, little wolves walking upright." One of the men chuckled behind Hartley. Silas didn't blink. Hartley smiled, thin as paper. "Sinners run to the wilderness, same as Adam did." Silas's voice was flat. "I'm not church-going, Reverend." "No, you're not." Silas shifted slightly, blocking the door behind him. Hartley studied him a long moment, then gestured to his men. "Search the tree line." The 2 men moved off. Hartley lingered. "Anything you'd like to confess, Granger?" Silas held his gaze. "I'm not a confessor." At last, Hartley smiled again. False. Brittle. "Well, be seeing you." The 3 men vanished into the snow. Clara didn't breathe until long after. Inside, Silas sat heavily by the hearth. "They'll be back," Clara said. "I know. We can't stay." Silas looked at her, at Eli, sleeping soundly for once. "No." Clara hesitated. "You're not going to turn us in?" "Would have done that already." "Why not?" Silas stared at the flames. "Because I'm tired of burying people." Neither spoke after that. That night something changed. Silas found fresh meat hanging from a branch outside the cabin, herbs tied around the twine. No tracks. Only one man could leave a gift like that without leaving a trace. Dakota. He hadn't seen the Lakota in years, but Clara saw him too. She stood in the doorway, peering into the dark. "Who is he?" she whispered. "An old debt." "Is he dangerous?" "Not to us." The next day, Silas packed supplies. When Clara asked where they were going, he answered simply, "Somewhere the Reverend won't find." She looked down at Eli. "Will he make it?" Silas met her eyes. "I don't know." They left before dawn. The snow swallowed their tracks. The cabin stood empty, but for the first time in years, Silas felt like he was moving toward something, not away. The forest swallowed them. Each step was slow, deliberate, cautious. Snow fell heavier now, blanketing the pine canopy above and silencing their passage. Silas led, his boots breaking a narrow path through drifts that reached his knees. Clara followed, carrying Eli on her back. Though her thin arms trembled with every step, she refused to hand him over. Her breath came in ragged gasps, yet her eyes burned with something fiercer than fear. Hours passed, the storm worsened. At times, Silas considered stopping, building a shelter, but every instinct told him to keep moving. Reverend Hartley's men wouldn't wait for morning. They'd follow, and snow covered sins, but not tracks. By twilight, Silas veered off the main deer trail and angled toward the northern ridge. He knew the place, an old ranger station, long abandoned. It wouldn't offer much, but walls mattered when death rode behind you. Eli stirred once against Clara's shoulder. He coughed weakly. She hushed him, voice cracking. Finally, the station emerged, a crooked outline half swallowed by snowdrifts. Silas shouldered the door open, rotting timber, moldering walls, but inside, the wind fell silent. He dropped his pack. Clara stumbled in, lowered Eli onto the cold floor, and then, as if her body had nothing left to give, she collapsed beside him. Silas moved fast. He sparked a fire from the half-dry pine he'd gathered, coaxing the reluctant flame to life. Warmth spread slowly. He forced Clara to sit up, fed her broth, watched her swallow without tasting. Eli didn't wake. Silas touched the boy's forehead. Too cold. Clara's voice broke. "Is he dying?" Silas said nothing, but his silence spoke clearer than words. She wiped her eyes, furious with herself for crying. Outside, wolves howled. Night thickened. In the darkness, footsteps circled the station. Silas heard them first, the crunch of men, not animals. He doused the fire to embers and pushed Clara and Ela behind the rotting bunks. Voices drifted between the trees, Hartley's calm, patient. "Granger, there's nowhere left to run." Silas cocked the revolver, knowing 5 bullets wouldn't stop 10 men. Clara's hand touched his. He looked down. Her eyes met his, not with fear, but understanding. "Don't die for us." Silas's voice cracked for the first time. "Too late." Gunfire shattered the window. Wood splintered. Glass rained down. Silas fired once, twice, dropping a shadow in the doorway. The return shot tore through the wall inches from his head. "Go!" he snarled. Clara hesitated, then grabbed Eli and crawled toward the back window, heart hammering so loud she thought the men outside could hear. A shape moved in the snow beyond, then a scream. One of Hartley's men crumpled in the snow, an arrow buried in his throat. Another fell, felled by a silent figure moving like a ghost between the trees. Dakota. Clara saw him only once, his face streaked in war paint, his eyes burning with something ancient and merciless. Gunfire cracked again. Silas took a hit to the shoulder but kept firing. Dakota's arrows flew without pause. Hartley's voice shifted from calm to anger. "Light it! Burn them out!" Clara froze. They were going to set the station alight. She looked at Silas. Blood seeped down his arm. "We have to leave." He nodded. Dakota appeared in the broken doorway, silent as smoke, gesturing urgently. Silas hauled himself up, staggering toward him. Clara carried Eli, though her legs barely obeyed her. Behind them, flames caught the old wood. Snow fell harder. Sparks shot into the night. They fled into darkness. Hours later, they stopped. The ridge loomed above them now, a black line against the faint stars. Dakota disappeared again. No words, no promises, only silent protection. Silas collapsed against a tree, clutching his wound. Clara sat near him, holding Eli close. Silas watched her from the shadows, breath ragged, mind spinning. "I thought I was saving you." Clara didn't answer. Silas's voice cracked. "But you're saving me." Then, at last, Eli stirred. Small fingers brushed Silas's hand. His voice came, a fragile whisper. "Home." One word. It hit Silas harder than any bullet. He looked down at the boy, stunned. Eli was staring at him. Not afraid, not hollow, but steady. "Say it again," Silas whispered. Eli hesitated, then softer. "Home." Clara's arms tightened around her brother. Tears burned her cheeks, but she smiled. Silas felt something break in his chest, something he'd locked away long ago. The dawn came slow and silver. They moved again. By midday they reached the valley beyond the ridge, safe for now. Dakota waited, silent as stone. He nodded once to Silas, then faded back into the trees. A cabin stood ahead, smaller than Silas's, half buried, empty. Silas looked at Clara. "Yours now." Clara stared at him. "What about you?" Silas didn't answer. He turned away, but Clara's voice stopped him. "You can't leave." Silas stood frozen. "You said we saved you." Silas looked back, eyes hollow. "I'm no father." "Neither was mine," Clara whispered. The wind shifted. Snow fell softer. Eli reached for Silas's hand. This time Silas didn't pull away. Weeks passed. Snow melted. Silas stayed. Not as a father, not at first, but as something. Clara helped him repair the cabin. Eli learned to walk again, holding Silas's hand. In the evenings, Clara read old books aloud, her voice slow but sure. Silas listened, silently, carving wood in his hands, each carving smaller than the last. One night Clara asked him why. He said nothing, but when she fell asleep he placed the carving beside her, a tiny wooden sparrow. Outside, the first flowers bloomed. One morning a rider came, from the town. Silas took the letter, read it slowly. Search ended. Children presumed dead. He burned the letter, without a word. Clara watched the smoke rise. Silas turned. We should go. Clara frowned. Where? Silas hesitated. Wherever you want. Eli pulled at his coat, eyes wide. Home. Silas's throat tightened. He looked at the children, at the cabin, at the trees, and then, finally, he smiled. Guess we're already there. The wind shifted. The world felt lighter. For the first time in years, Silas Granger wasn't alone. He wasn't saving them. They'd saved him. And outside, the snow melted quietly, leaving the earth ready to heal. And if this story stirred something inside you, if you believe that even the coldest hearts can find warmth again, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that remind us, sometimes, it's not about who we save, but who saves us.